Hello everyone and welcome back to another 3D Tinkerer video. So today we're going to be discussing some of the Blender 2.8 patch notes, and it's going to be kind of loosely structured. I'm mainly going to be talking about things that I kind of think are more important / interesting. There's also some more complicated things that I can't really go into in this video, but this will be kind of like a general overview into the entire 2.8 update that's coming out soon. So right now I'm working on the release candidate, so the final version isn't quite out yet. The stable version will be coming out soon. So let's just kind of jump right into it. So you can see here, this is the development page for Blender 2.8. We do also have it downloaded here. If I go over, this is the new splash screen from the spring, I believe it was the open movie. So it looks very cool, and you can see everything basically looks the same from my other 2.8 videos, but this is basically the final version for Blender. So anyways, I have a couple examples to go over. So first off the bat, you've heard it in every other 2.8 video. One of the biggest changes to Blender 2.8 is its new rendering engine, which is Eevee. It's a real-time rendering engine. It replaced the internal one that they've had for a while. And basically you can come over to the render engine under render settings and change it to Eevee. And I have a couple examples here. So I'm not going to be talking about it too much in this video because there's still a lot that I need to learn about Eevee before I can really go into it. But you can see here I have a basic glass-like material with just like a plastic cube. Yeah, Eevee's really cool. You can do basically instantaneous renders because it's all real time. Also helps a lot with, like concepts, if you're sculpting, trying to, refine an object or character. So it's very cool. There's also, of course, in Blender 2.8, the new UI. So as you can see, if we jump back over to this is a fresh Blender file right here. You can see we have a lot of the important tools on the sidebar here. We no longer have that like collection of tools in a big list. It's a bit neater. Obviously, the properties panel has a bit of colorful icons, and it's a bit more clear. Once you get used to it, it's a bit more clear. Obviously this weird circle, you wouldn't really understand what it is. It's physics. We also have these tabs up top where you can quickly switch between different workflows like animation, rendering, texturing, etc., UV unwrapping. And you don't have to use these, they're optional. You can also create your own with the plus. I'm not going to go over the entire UI overhaul, but there's a lot going on here. So they also have a new system for 2D animation, which again, that's something I can't really go over because it's very brand new and I haven't really worked with grease pencil in the past, but it is very cool. We've seen some demos for it in the past. So we also have a lot of improvements to cycles. So let's see here. I'm going to jump back over to my main blend file for this tutorial, and let's also switch over to cycles for our render engine. So there's a lot of changes to cycle. Off the bat, we have a couple of new nodes. The first one I'm going to be talking about is the principled hair and principled volume. So basically, this is a node similar to the principled BSDF. I believe it's the BSDF, that's how you say it. Basically, now we have nodes to better control the finer aspects of the particle systems for hair and the volume materials. So it's very cool. These are also hot off the press, so I won't be talking about these too much in depth, but basically we now have something that is easy to use, like the basic BSDF over here, where everything's kind of in one package. You don't really have to, have a big string of nodes anymore, especially with the volume. Like, for example, if you wanted to make like an ocean volume setting, you had to add like a scatter and an absorption and a mix shader, and it was just a real hassle. So it's nice to see that that's no longer the case. We also have a new displacement node, which is very cool. We had some experimental versions of this in the past, but I think this is finally almost release ready, once the stable release comes out. So you see here I have a basic sphere, and what I did was I applied a displacement node. So this is a new node, and it goes into the displacement plugin that we've had before, but you have to use the displacement node. And all I did was I applied a noise texture to it. I didn't really change any of the settings except the scale. And you see By default, it just affects the normals, and we've had that for a while. But if we go to the material panel with our object selected, and I go down to settings and then displacement, if I change it from bump only to displacement and bump, you can see it'll actually generate some of that geometry, and that's with a subdivision surface. So to use these new vertex displacement maps and all that, you need a displacement node and you need a subdivision with enough geometry, basically. You'll see if I get rid of the displacement, it's basically just a cube that I applied a subdivision on, so not too hard. We also have a new bevel node, or we have new changes to the bevel node. Here's a kind of boxy object that I have right here. So you'll see here, if I select this object and we go into the rendered view, sorry, let me hide that, that's something else. You'll see that we have a nice little beveled edge here. It's kind of hard to see, but it looks nice and smooth. And that's actually all normal trickery. That there isn't actually geometry there to support that edge. You'll see here, if I remove the normal plugin right there, it goes to that hard edge, and I believe this is with smooth shading. Let me double check. Yeah, this is with smooth shading. So basically, there's a new bevel node, and all you really do is you take the normal output and you put it in whatever material you're using, and you can tweak the radius and the samples, which is basically the quality. It also has a normal node on the back, which I'm assuming is if you already have a normal map that you want to use, you can just kind of plug it in there and it'll add it over top. So it's pretty handy. We also have a new ambient occlusion node, so you can see over here, that's that brown stuff that I had earlier. This is great for like wearing, or basically like a grimy surface where there's a lot of occlusion going on, or ambient occlusion. So you can see here, I basically have the ambient occlusion node going into a color ramp, and then it's getting overlaid. I don't know if this is the best setup for it, but you can see here, I can tweak the rough, or the amount of occlusion going on. So you can see with my color ramp here, I can make it very subtle, and you can see it's only really down here where there's a lot where the faces are really close to each other. It also interacts with other objects. So let's see here, if I bump this all the way up, you can see it's also interacting with this object down here, even though it's completely separate. And that's pretty cool, considering it's all in one node. So yeah. This specific setup, if you want to change the color, you have to do some color ramp trickery and all that, but just know that there's a new ambient occlusion node that you can use, so it's pretty cool. It is recommended, though, that you bake the ambient occlusion, because if you have like an animation, it'll actually slow down the render quite a bit. So be careful if you're using the ambient occlusion node. I believe it's also the case with the bevel. I think it's more so with the bevel that was the problem, but yeah, so that's pretty cool. Cycles also has a overall like 10 to 30% improvement on rendering speed. So basically they did some behind the scenes changes, but they also did combine CPU and GPU rendering. So that means now if you go up to edit, preferences, and then you go to system, you can enable your graphics card if you have one installed, and also your CPU. So now, while in Cycles, if I were to hit render and then image, so basically if you had a camera in your scene like I do now, you can see now it's using both my 8 cores on my CPU to render in addition to my GPU. So that's pretty cool. I won't let that thing go all the way through. Another improvement they did to Cycles is that you no longer need to have a large tile size for your GPU. So if you're familiar with GPU rendering in Cycles, you used to have to tweak the tile size with your graphics card to get the sweet spot to like really maximize your performance. But now, theoretically, you can just go to your render settings and go into performance, and you could change the tile size to 32 for both the X and the Y, and it should be just as fast as if you had a much higher tile size. And this also helps out the CPU a bit too. I don't know if the CPU I don't know if it's the same problem with the CPU, needing a smaller tile size for your CPU to go faster, but it definitely will improve it. So I won't let that go through all the way, but very cool. Cycles improvements are always very welcomed, considering how long it takes for real-time rendering. We also have IES lights. Basically, IES lights are, you apply a special file to your point lights or your spotlights. I think it's specifically spotlights in some cases, if you want a certain look. But basically, it'll here are a bunch of examples of IES lights that you can get. This was just some paid package I found online. I just snagged the sample to show you, but basically it gives you like these different like tones in the lighting. It's kind of like similar to just a regular like light bulb or a lamp or something like that. Obviously it doesn't look as low quality as these. I just snagged that sample image, but definitely very cool. Another thing that we have is multi-object editing. So I'm going to use my Eevee example for this. Basically, really short and simple. If you have multiple objects selected, now if you hit tab, both of them will go into edit mode. So this is really cool if you need to edit like a bunch, like an array that you say you had an array modifier and you already applied it. You can still edit all the objects. So just like little quality of life stuff. Just kind of going down the list a bit more. Collections are very cool. That's the new organization thing in Blender 2.8. You can see I have a bunch of collections on the side. You can either add a new collection by clicking the little button up here that says new collection, or you can press M on your keyboard and hit new and create a new collection, or select a different one. So definitely very cool. I know I've used this a lot personally with my swap over to 2.8, especially if you if you want to like copy your object and put it in a different collection and call it like exports, and then apply all your modifiers and stuff like that. I find it's very helpful. It's almost like a version control. That's what I usually use it for. But obviously if you have a big scene, you can place props and armatures and stuff. It's just overall much easier to use. There's also the bevel modifier. So if I go up to bevel modifier, bevel, it isn't a new modifier, but they did add a new setting to it. I'm not quite sure how it works, to be honest. It's kind of weird. Basically, they added this hardened normals button, which from what I understand is it'll kind of smooth out. Oh, sorry, I hit the Windows key. It'll basically smooth out these edges. So you'll see here, this is with it on. If I turn it off, see how we have these really sharp edges by this bevel? Basically, it'll kind of try to smooth those out while preserving that top and bottom edge right here. You do need to enable auto smooth. You'll see here if I turn off auto smooth, we get that really, this is with smooth shading on, so there's a lot of artifacts. But you'll see here if I hit harden normals, it'll say please enable auto smooth, and there you go. So I'm not really sure of all the use cases for this, but it's still pretty cool. There's also a new there's a new face strength mode. I'm not quite, it's kind of weird with this one. I'm not really sure what it does, but mither patterns, I can show you that one. Basically, mither patterns will change how the geometry flows around a certain edge if you have connecting edges selected like this. So you can see this is with a sharp mither, this is with a patch, and this is with an arc. So just more ways to control your bevels, and this is all available in the actual like bevel hotkey. You don't have to just use the modifier. You can see here if I hit I, it'll change the mither type. So very cool. Just some more side things. Metaball animations can now be exported, and that's pretty cool because if you've seen my lava lamp tutorial, you can now export those animations to say Unreal. So just some more cool things you can do now. WebM support is now added, so basically you can export your animations with WebM. There's a new dependency graph for animators. There's some more options. So now there's 2 more options for tablet pressure control. So if you do sculpting or texture painting, that's pretty cool. There's new pie menus I can show you real quick. So I'll just kind of list them off. I don't expect anybody to really remember them, but if you hit comma, you can change the orientation. So the transform orientation, sorry. So that's comma. You can change the pivot settings. So you can see medium, 3D cursor, stuff like that. There's also viewport, which is tilde. You can change the viewport snap. You can change shading with Z. There's render, wireframe, look dev. You can change your snap settings with Shift S. And you can also change proportional editing with Shift O. So just a lot of cool things with pie menus going on. Cloth sims are now a bit more accurate and faster. They changed, I think it was the angular spring is what it was called. Basically, they just made it a lot faster and a lot more true to life. You can now drag and drop blend files into your Blender instance called text. So if I drag this into my scene and drop it, you can see I can either open it as a new instance, or I can link it and append it. So in this case, I will append it, and I'll go to Object, Text, and you can see here, this is what was in my scene. It's the text. So that's pretty cool. Blender now reminds you when you close to save, so that's pretty cool. In the past, I think it would just close, or it might give you a pop-up. But you see here, if I hit the X, it'll say this file has unsaved changes, so you can hit save, discard, and cancel. A very basic feature, but something we just haven't had for a while. That's pretty cool. And there's a new object scatter add-on, which basically allows you to select a couple objects. I think you can select as many as possible, and basically you can paint on a surface kind of like with the grease pencil, and it'll kind of scatter the objects around. So this would be good for like debris if you want to make a prop for like Unreal. I know I use Blender for Unreal almost exclusively at this point, but yeah, so there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with that add-on. So yeah, that's basically it. So those are my Blender 2.8 personal things that I'm looking forward to using. There's a lot that I didn't go over, but if you really want to find out what I missed, you can go over to blender.org/downloads, releases, and then 2.8. I'll also leave a link down in the description, and most of the features are down here. You can see here, if you click on them, it'll take you to the references. This is what I've been kind of eyeballing over. And if you go over to releases, there's basically like a mini list of all the new features. So definitely very cool. I'm looking forward to making more tutorial videos with Blender 2.8. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. And if you have any video ideas, I will also be looking for those, so please leave them down below. We recently hit 700 subscribers, so that's very cool. We're getting close to that monetization status on YouTube. So be sure to share this video with your friends or family or anybody who might be interested in Blender or 3D modeling in general. You know, that exposure really helps the channel, and I really appreciate it. So yeah, that's about it for this video. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.